It started with a letter, stark, officious, and condescending in its tone, wedged between a stack of junk mail and a power bill. I remember the moment with startling clarity. A Tuesday morning, sunlight pooling across my kitchen counter, the faint hum of the newly installed solar panels overhead feeding power into my home. I was sipping coffee, feeling a rare sense of satisfaction, when the HOA's emblem at the top of the envelope caught my eye. I tore it open and read the first line. Mr. Lawson, your unauthorized installation of solar panels constitutes a direct violation of this community's bylaws regarding aesthetics and uniformity. I frowned. The letter went on to say that the unsightly equipment would need to be removed within 30 days, or I would be subjected to daily fines of $500 until the violation was corrected. The sheer audacity was astounding. My solar panels weren't just legal. They were state-of-the-art, black-on-black units, barely noticeable from the street. But that didn't matter to the HOA, and especially not to its queen bee, Karen Wilcox. Karen was the kind of HOA president who thrived on control. She was in her late 50s, perfectly coiffed, and somehow always managed to look like she was about to host a charity gala. She drove a white Mercedes SUV, carried a clipboard like a weapon, and could sniff out a perceived violation from 2 blocks away. She loved rules, or rather, she loved bending them to her will. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 3 years and managed to avoid her radar until now. But solar panels? That was blood in the water. By that evening, Karen herself was at my doorstep, clipboard in hand, lips pursed into a thin line of determination. Mr. Lawson, I trust you received our letter. I did, I replied, leaning casually against the doorframe. And you're mistaken. The panels are fully legal under state law. You can't enforce that bylaw. Her eyes narrowed, the kind of cat gives when cornered. This community has standards, and those contraptions violate them. You'll need to take them down, or the fines will begin. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. I'm afraid that's not going to happen. Karen straightened, as though bracing herself to unleash the full weight of her self-appointed authority. We'll see about that. She spun on her heel and marched back to her Mercedes, barking into her phone before she even closed the door. I watched her drive away, my mind already spinning with possibilities. Because what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the state energy commissioner. And this was about to get very interesting. The next week was a slow boil of passive-aggressive warfare. Karen's letters escalated from stern reminders to threats of legal action. She cited obscure bylaws, scheduled mandatory compliance inspections, and even sent a photographer to take pictures of my property from the sidewalk like it was a crime scene. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I started gathering information. I requested the HOA's bylaws and financial records, which I knew they were legally obligated to provide. I combed through every line, highlighting the clauses where their so-called restrictions on renewable energy blatantly violated state law. I knew the statutes by heart. I'd written half of them. Meanwhile, I stayed cordial with the other homeowners, casually mentioning the letters I'd been receiving. It didn't take long to realize I wasn't the only one Karen had bullied. One neighbor had been fined for having a garden bed that didn't match the community. By the time I attended the next HOA meeting, I wasn't just armed with the law, I had allies. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a cavernous room with rows of folding chairs and the faint smell of lemon-scented cleaner. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by a board of sycophants who nodded whenever she spoke. She wore a bright red blazer, the kind of power outfit that screamed intimidation. As soon as I walked in, her eyes locked on me. "Mr. Lawson," she said with forced sweetness, "I trust you're here to discuss your violation." "Actually," I said, stepping forward and placing a thick folder on the table, "I'm here to discuss your violation." A murmur rippled through the room. Karen blinked,
thrown off balance for the first time. "Excuse me?" I opened the folder, pulling out a copy of the state statute. This community's bylaw against solar panels is illegal under Section 12415 of the Renewable Energy Protection Act. You cannot fine homeowners for installing them, and any attempt to do so is a violation of state law. A law, I might add, that carries significant penalties for HOAs that ignore it. Karen's face flushed crimson. That's not relevant. Our bylaws are clear." "They're invalid," I cut in, my voice calm but firm. "And if you persist, I'll have no choice but to report this HOA to the Attorney General's office for enforcement. Do you really want to explain to the state why you've been extorting homeowners with illegal fines?" The room fell silent. Even Karen's board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Karen wasn't done. Her lips curled into a smug smile. "You think you can intimidate me? I'll see you in court." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so the room had to strain to hear. "You really don't want that, Karen. Because I'm not just a homeowner. I'm the State Energy Commissioner, which means I oversee the laws you're trying to break. If you want to pick this fight, you're picking it with the state government." Her color drained from her face. I straightened, closing the folder with a decisive snap. "Remove the bylaw, cancel the fines, and while you're at it, refund every homeowner you've wrongfully charged over the years, or I'll dismantle this entire HOA brick by brick." The murmurs erupted into open whispers now, homeowners trading shocked glances. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She sat there, seething in silence, her knuckles white as she gripped her pen. I left the meeting knowing the war wasn't over, but the tide had shifted. Because I wasn't just going to stop Karen, I was going to expose her. The morning after the HOA meeting, Karen's mask began to slip. She didn't send another letter about the solar panels, but that didn't mean she was done. She was a woman who thrived on control, and losing even a sliver of it would never sit well. By Thursday, I started noticing unfamiliar cars idling near my driveway. One followed me to work. Another parked across from my house for hours with a man inside pretending to scroll his phone. I knew intimidation tactics when I saw them. But I wasn't intimidated. I'd already opened a formal investigation into the HOA. Using my authority as State Energy Commissioner gave me access to resources Karen had no idea existed. I pulled their financial statements, tax filings, and contractor records, and what I found was a gold mine. Inflated maintenance fees, kickbacks to a landscaping company owned by Karen's cousin, and thousands in miscellaneous expenses that were completely unaccounted for. I wasn't just going to win, I was going to burn her empire down. 2 weeks later, I hosted my own meeting. This time, it wasn't in the HOA clubhouse. I rented out the community park pavilion and invited every homeowner in the neighborhood. Nearly everyone came.
Karen arrived late, flanked by 2 board members, her red blazer now a defiant battle flag. "This is not an official HOA meeting," she declared the moment she stepped into the crowd. "Anything discussed here is irrelevant." "Funny you should say that," I replied from the front of the pavilion, microphone in hand, "because the state government thinks otherwise." I motioned to the screen behind me where I had projected the HOA's financial documents. Line by line, I explained the violations, the illegal fines, the fraudulent contracts, the embezzlement disguised as maintenance. Gasps echoed through the crowd as I revealed how Karen had been siphoning money from the community for years. Karen stepped forward, her voice shaking. "This is slander. You can't just—" "Oh, I can," I said, holding up a letter embossed with the state seal. "And so can the Attorney General's office. They've already issued a cease and desist order for your HOA. Effective immediately, all operations are suspended pending a full criminal investigation." The homeowners erupted, a mix of cheers and angry questions directed at Karen. She backed away, her face ashen. "You think you can get rid of me this easily?" she hissed over the noise. "This neighborhood needs me." "No," I said, my voice steady and amplified through the speakers. "This neighborhood needs honesty and fairness, something you clearly can't provide." The days that followed were a slow-motion implosion for Karen. State investigators combed through her records. Neighbors she once terrorized came forward with stories and evidence. Local news stations caught wind of the scandal and camped outside her home, cameras rolling as she tried to avoid them. One evening, I sat on my porch, the solar panels overhead humming quietly, when a news anchor's voice floated through the open window. "Former HOA President Karen Wilcox faces multiple charges of fraud, extortion, and misuse of community funds." I smiled. A month later, we held a special election for a new community association. This time, it wasn't stacked with Karen's allies. Real homeowners stepped up, people who cared about the neighborhood, not their own egos. We voted to permanently remove the anti-solar bylaw and refunded every homeowner who had been fined illegally. Karen, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. Word was she'd sold her house and left the state to avoid further humiliation. One night, as I locked up the community clubhouse after the election, a neighbor approached me. She said, "You know, I was afraid of Karen for years. I thought she was untouchable, but you actually stopped her." I shrugged. She picked the wrong person to push around. As I walked home beneath the glow of the streetlights, I glanced at the solar panels gleaming faintly on rooftops all around me. Homeowners had rushed to install them after the bylaws were struck down, and the neighborhood now buzzed with clean, renewable energy. It was a quiet victory, but it was ours. Karen had tried to control everyone with fear. She'd wielded fines and rules like weapons. But in the end, it was her own arrogance that destroyed her. And as I stood beneath the hum of my panels, I knew one thing for sure: this community would never belong to someone like her again.